Today, we're digging into a really fascinating story for anyone who follows the stock market. It's about a company that has totally reinvented itself, but, well, the market just isn't buying it yet. Let's talk about Veris Residential.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of the puzzle here. On one hand, Veris is putting up some killer numbers. Their same-store net operating income, that's a key profitability metric, grew by 5.6%, which is fantastic. But then you look at the stock price, and it's trading for almost 30% less than what its buildings are actually worth. So what gives?
You see a high-performing company that looks this cheap, and you've got to ask, what's the real story here? We're going to peel back the layers on this one to figure out why this huge disconnect exists and, what it might mean for an investor.
To really get what's happening now, we have to rewind the clock a bit. The skepticism around Veris isn't really about the company it is today, it's about the company it used to be.
For years and years, this company had a different name, Mack-Cali. And Mack-Cali was, well, kind of a mess. It was a big, complicated REIT, that's a real estate investment trust, and it was all in on suburban office buildings. And that's been an incredibly tough business to be in. That old reputation, it hangs around.
So they went on this long journey to change. It wasn't an overnight thing. It started all the way back in 2015, and they began methodically selling off all those old office buildings. Then, in 2021, they completely rebranded to Veris, and just this year, in 2024, they sold their very last office property. It was a complete teardown and rebuild from the ground up.
And that brings us to this idea of a credibility discount. You see, the business is totally different now, but the memory of the old, struggling Mack-Cali, it's like a ghost that's still haunting the stock. The market is basically folding its arms and saying, yeah, we see the changes, but you're going to have to prove it to us.
So, after all that work, what did they actually build?
Let's take a look under the hood of the new Veris, because it's a completely different kind of real estate machine.
The new portfolio is pretty impressive. Veris is now what we call a pure-play luxury apartment company. We're talking about shiny new buildings, the average age is only about 9 years old, and they're all in these really desirable, hard-to-build-in markets in the Northeast. Get this, over 72% of their rent comes from the New Jersey Gold Coast, right across the river from Manhattan.
And this number right here, this tells you so much about their customer base. The average household income of a person renting from Veris is nearly $500,000, and they're only spending about 10% of that on rent. For a landlord, that is an incredibly stable and reliable source of income.
Okay, so great properties, great tenants. So why the massive discount? We're about to get to the single biggest reason the market is so hesitant. And here it is. It really all comes down to this one chart. Veris is carrying a whole lot of debt. A key metric for this is net debt to EBITDA, and their number is more than double their competitors. This is the financial baggage from the old company, the heavy anchor that's holding the stock back.
And here's why that matters so much to investors. High debt makes a company fragile. It magnifies every little risk, makes earnings more volatile. For a lot of big institutional investors, a debt level this high is just an automatic no. It's a non-starter, so they're just waiting on the sidelines.
But here's the thing. Management knows this is the problem. They're not ignoring it. In fact, they have a very clear, very public plan to tackle this debt head-on.
And a huge part of the story is their CEO, Mahbod. Why? Because he's done this exact thing before. At another company, he led a nearly identical turnaround that ended with a successful sale of the company and made shareholders a lot of money. So he's got the blueprint.
And that blueprint is actually pretty simple. It's a 3-step plan. Step 1, sell off some leftover land and non-essential assets. Step 2, take every single penny from those sales and use it to pay down debt. And step 3, just keep running their fantastic apartment buildings better than anyone else. That's the whole plan.
So you put all this together, and it leads to this classic dilemma for anyone looking at the stock. You've got a very clear opportunity on one side and a very real risk on the other.
Let's break it down. The bull case, the argument for investing, is pretty strong. You have a superior portfolio, great operations, a clear plan to fix the debt, and that huge discount. But you can't ignore the bear case. The debt is still really high, they're very concentrated in one geographic area, and there's always a risk they won't be able to sell their assets at the prices they want.
And this is where it gets really interesting when you look at how the stock is valued. If you look at it one way, using a metric kind of like a PE ratio for REITs, Veris looks expensive. But that's just because all that debt means high interest payments, which crushes their earnings right now.
But if you value based on its assets, what the buildings are worth, it looks incredibly cheap. The whole bet here is that as they pay down debt, those interest payments will fall, earnings will go up, and that valuation gap will slam shut.
So, how do we wrap this whole thing up? You know, the entire story, from its messy past to its promising future, really boils down to one simple concept. It's a prove-it story. That's it. Success here isn't about some miracle cure or a stroke of luck. It all comes down to whether or not management can actually execute the simple plan they've laid out for everyone. They have to prove to the market that this transformation is real, not just on paper, but on the balance sheet.
And that's really the final question we're left with, isn't it? They've successfully built this beautiful, high-performance engine with their new portfolio. The only question is, can they finally cut the cord and shed the dead weight of their past? The answer to that is going to determine the entire next chapter for Veris Residential.